So as you know, in my opinion, anyone who's willing to devote a big part of their life to something bigger than they are is a hero. So happy to be here among heroes. There's a piece of advice I'm sure you're familiar with. It goes, make no small plans. It's actually rubbish. It's not true. We need to make small plans all the time. At least I do. I need to plan how not to lose my keys, for example, or how not to put on my T-shirt inside out, which I did this week, and discovered it just after my week's most important Zoom call. People who know me know, and Sal somehow left this out of his generous introduction, that I can be embarrassingly absent-minded and also a little literal-minded, which is why I'm standing here nitpicking a quote, which is actually one of the most profound pieces of advice I've ever had. And it's what I really want to talk about. The actual quote is, make no little plans. It's worth reading the whole thing. This is a quote from Daniel Burnham, who's a Chicago architect. He said this more than 130 years ago. Here's a slightly edited version of the quote. Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir the blood, and therefore, probably, themselves will not be realized. Make big plans. Remember that a noble, logical vision will never die, but long after we are gone will be a living thing, asserting itself with ever-growing insistency. Remember that our children and grandchildren are going to do things that would stagger us. Let our watchwords be determination and hope. Think big. So I first heard this quote from the late beloved philanthropist Richard Rockefeller. We were on a boat together heading to the Galapagos. I think it was 2012. We had 100 people on board. They were nonprofits trying to do something about protecting the oceans, about 8 of them, 8 or 9, and a group of donors. And the nonprofits were trying to raise money from the donors to realize their plans. And it wasn't going very well. And on dinner, on the second night, I think, Richard stood up and said, I see how hard this is. I know how hard this is. We spend our time trying to persuade people things that we passionately believe in, and they kind of don't immediately say yes. And you know what we do? We cut back, we compromise, we try and think of a smaller plan that maybe they could say yes to. What I want to tell you is that I think that's a terrible thing to do, and that the best and wisest donors out there aren't interested in small plans. Don't ask for less. Ask for more. Be audacious. This is what he said. I never got those words out of my head. It really resonated with something that I'd noticed in my time at TED. At TED, I got to meet a lot of amazing people, many different types. Some of them were social entrepreneurs, like some people in this room, devoting their lives to something that was bigger than they were. And you know what the world rewarded them with for that? Fundraising meetings. An endless bloody line of them. I mean, how crazy is it that we've organized a world where the people who are most willing to take something that matters, and we ask them to spend 80% of their time fundraising. This is so screwed up. So that pissed me off. I was married to an incredible social entrepreneur, Jacqueline Novogratz, and I saw the toll it took on her. She wanted to be out there changing the world. She wanted to be out there doing the work, not spending ever more meetings. And I know that a lot of you feel the same. How many people here are involved in fundraising in some way or other? So you feel it, right? And then I met another group of people at TED who were basically successful entrepreneurs. They made a killing. Some of them were billionaires. And when you talk to them about philanthropy, it was really, really interesting. Because they would say, yeah, this is going to be an important part of my life. And then you ask them about specific philanthropic projects, and they kind of got uncomfortable. And when you pushed a bit, what I discovered, and what I almost felt a bit myself, was that the way that a lot of philanthropy was presented to them, it came over to them as boring. They made their money by dreaming big, by having kind of crazy entrepreneurial plans, and some of them delivering on them. They get excited by big ideas. And so put all the dots together here, and the came, could we do something about it? Could we solve both these problems? Could we make it easier for nonprofits to raise money and make philanthropy more exciting for donors? And so the answer that we wanted to try out was to ask nonprofits, our social entrepreneurs, a question that they hardly ever get asked, which is, hey, what could you do? What could you and your team really do if money was no object? Could you have a dream about that? Have a think about that. What's the biggest, boldest, baddest, assest, most audacious plan you can come up with? Turns out they had answers to that. Amazing answers. This was the seeding of a thing called the Audacious Project that came into being, nearly 10 years ago now. And from hundreds of possible ideas, we condensed down to 10 that were credible and had evidence behind them. And you could make a case that you could really picture that this team could, over the next few years, achieve this amazing thing. We put those 10 plans together, and we connected them with a group of big-hearted but currently slightly bored donors in one place at one time. And something amazing happened. They got excited. They got excited by the plans. In the very first one we did, one plan, I watched where 7 people were in a room listening to one social entrepreneur who was trying to raise $100 million to dramatically scale the impact of his work. And one person said, I'm persuaded, I'm in for 15 million, and looked around and 7 other hands went up. Money was raised in 60 seconds. I mean, it was incredible. Of course, another plan, the woman pushing it came to report back, and she was in tears. She said, no one came to my session. And yet I believe this is the most important work of my life. Whereupon one donor who was there said, actually, I meant to come to your session. I'm excited by your idea. I will chip in 5 million. And there's a way to change the game here. There is a way to change the game. In the most recent Audacious that we've had, we've raised in that retreat basically $1 billion for 10 projects. And committed over 5 years. And the donors are inspired by the process. They actually, they cry. And so I guess the brainstorm I want with you is, how do you tap into that? Like, not everyone can be an audacious project. We welcome applications for people if you've got something really big to dream about. But what we've heard from people is that just the process of dreaming big is transformative. So one suggestion is, I guess that many of you are sitting there consumed with just how hard it is to keep the lights on, to take an organization and grow it 5 or 10% a year, or maybe even just to avoid shrinking it 5 or 10% a year. How hard that is, and how many emails and phone calls and, fundraising events it takes. Maybe, just maybe, it's worth a half-day brainstorm with your best people to say, let's not think about growing our org 5%. Let's think about quadrupling it. Let's think about what's the most outsized impact we could have if everything went right and if a big gush of funding came in. Actually, what could we achieve? What's the opportunity space here? What's the possibility space? Can we be creative? Can we do something that will send chills down the back of the next group of donors we speak to because of its audacity? Can we excite people? I think there's a possibility space out there that is way underexplored of what the nonprofit world actually could achieve if it was given permission to dream bigger. In the for-profit world, entrepreneurs are out there all the time dreaming their big-ass dreams because they know that there's a group of venture capitalists, out there to do it. Ultimately, there might be an IPO that can fund them for good, and people dream big, and amazing companies are created. The future can't be built just by the markets. It really can't. There are so many issues out there. The world's an incredibly fragile place. So many of those issues aren't solved by someone thinking of a product that can be manufactured with a margin. It takes system change. It takes other types of magic to happen. Businesses are great. They contain the engine of their own growth. You make a profit, you can keep going, you can grow. But nonprofits actually have a powerful set of tools at their disposal, really. There's a lot of magical ways that we can shift the world. We can actually tap into the power of markets. You can make the difference between an entrepreneur, can invest in entrepreneurs and get them to critical mass. My wife's philanthropy invested for over 15 years, 17 years in a company called D-Light that the markets couldn't afford to touch because it was trying to bring solar power to people with no money in Africa. Took a long, long time. Eventually, the company did get to profitability, and it has now brought electricity to more than 100 million people. The 3 million that was spent to do that was unbelievably powerfully spent philanthropy. Huge leverage there. Or there's leverage from science and technology. I was really inspired recently by, was an Audacious project, David Feigenbaum and his organization Every Cure, that has figured out that you can use AI to uncover approved drugs that work on untreatable rare diseases that people think are a death sentence. They're having incredible success with that. We can leverage government sometimes. We can leverage the law. The campaigners who, behind the Marriage Equality Act, didn't have to go out and persuade every community in America that times needed to change. They just had to change one law. There's huge power in that. Dreaming big and dreaming creatively it has to be at the heart of our DNA. The biggest single mechanism for leverage and for making magic happen unexpectedly, I think it's the internet. We're in this incredible era where the whole world is connected. Unfortunately, those connections are causing some issues, but they can cause amazing good as well. I was inspired really by the Giving Tuesday story. Two amazing individuals, Henry Timms and Asher Curran at the Y a few years ago, just had this idea that there could be a day in the year when people got that focus right after Thanksgiving to donate. So they created a hashtag, and they said to nonprofits, we don't want to own this, we want you to own this, we just want to use it. Hashtag Giving Tuesday. And within a few months, they had the first hundreds of millions of dollars leveraged off this hashtag. Now it's multiple billions of dollars are spent every year as a result of that insight. My own organization, TED, has benefited from the largesse of the internet, the ability for things to spread. The key insight that we stumbled on was there's just enormous power in letting go, in being willing to say, we trust you, we're going to give away something that feels like a radical gift. So the first radical gift we gave away was our content. We were at the time we were basically just a once a year conference dependent on conference fees, and it felt like a crazy thing to give away all that content for free online back in 2006 when online video was just shaking into being. What happened was that it made TED. Word spread. People were inspired. They cried. They sent it to their friends. Suddenly everyone knew about TED. Instead of demand for the conference going down, it soared. And we were like, whoa, what is this? And it built into us an obsessive search for radical generosity. That was actually a strategic generosity that I think any organization, whether for-profit or non-profit, should explore. We tried it again with our brand. There were people wanting us to do TEDs all around the world. We didn't have the staff to do it. So we said, I know, you do it. We trust you. You can use our name. We'll just put a little X by it, a little asterisk. The X was meant to mean organized locally. It turned out to mean TED raised to the power of. We ended up with 3,000 events around the world. Yes, 3 or 4 were horribly embarrassing. Most of them were amazing, and people learned from each other, and the system grew. And so you have a situation now at TED where 10 people, 10 employees are overseeing a media operation that is 3,000 global events like this, bigger, smaller, but 3,000 events, 25,000 videos, 1 billion views on YouTube. It couldn't be done any other way than a model of radical generosity. So I think it was these experiences that inspired me to write Infectious Generosity, the fact that as we discovered in COVID, something doesn't have to be big to change the world. It could be a little freaking thing you can't even damn well see, and it can shut down the global economy if it's infectious. Can we make kindness infectious? Can we? I think there are ways to do it, but it needs creativity. It needs bold thinking. It needs big dreaming. I just think there are amazing dreams in our future that could get everyone so excited. We worry about deforestation. Let's dream of regreening the world's deserts. Let's dream of planting new forests. Cheap energy is making it possible to desalinate and imagine projects at a massive scale that just haven't been possible before. We worry about migration. Let's dream of a new nation, custom built for refugees, that welcomes them, that knows that they are brilliant, that they carry so much talent and entrepreneurial energy. That nation could play a huge part in the world. It's probably not that expensive to set up. It probably could soon fund itself. Where's the dream? Where's the dreaming? Philanthropy often subsidizes art, but could it go much bigger? Why don't we have an art project in the world that is so amazing on such an awesome scale and so inspiring that it inspires millions of people to go on a pilgrimage to see it, because it's a lifetime experience that you just have to do with your children, and that it brings people together across the world to mean something. We aren't currently giving artists ourselves permission to dream as big as we might. And I think if we did, everything changed. I was so inspired by it. There was a column in the New York Times a few days ago by John Fabian Witt. He spoke about Charles Garland setting up the first liberal philanthropic foundation of the age back in the 1920s, the American Fund for Public Service. So back in the 20s, it actually mirrored really closely a world that we're in right now. Massive and growing inequality, savage political divide and mistrust, lots of violence, a lot of people terribly fearful of the future. It was conditions that in other parts of the world led to fascism. In America, it actually, it might have, but it didn't. And what made the difference was the emergence of new types of philanthropy, new types of non-profit thinking, people ready to campaign and argue for things in different ways that hadn't been done before, to plant new ideas that hadn't been planted before. We're all worried about the future right now, I suspect. Like it really, if the world feels quite scary. I don't think the main answers are going to come from government or from the markets. I think they're going to come from people like you, who can change the rules of the game, can come up with different stories. Larry Kramer, who used to run the Hewlett Foundation, once told me that he thought the most effective philanthropy in history was a philanthropist who funded the work of Milton Friedman. He just received philanthropic funding for several years and came up with these ideas about free markets. You may not like those ideas, but they, in terms of philanthropy, nothing more effective. It changed the world. It ushered in this era of neoliberalism that's dominated the world, an era that arguably has now run its course. Not working like we want it to. Where are the philanthropists promoting the big new ideas about the future of democracy, of capitalism? Where are those dreams? That could reshape the future. So I'm excited to be here. You all are doing amazing work. In your own lives, I really encourage you to make lots of small plans. Do it. Don't be me. Live smart. But in this work, don't do that. Thank you. Good.
Does anybody have a question?
So it's time for questions and answers. Good ask premise. We have microphones around.
You're like everybody's fun.
Good, Mike.
Hi, Chris. I'm Asha with Global Giving. You provide a large stage to people from all types of backgrounds and experiences. Do you notice anything different in the storytelling from someone like a social entrepreneur to like the biggest entrepreneurs of the world on your stage?
I think the trap that can happen, and it often happens at TED, is that people come to the stage thinking, this is my opportunity to basically push my organization, my cause. And their story is, here's what I do, and here's what my organization does, and this is why it matters. And it feels self-serving. And audiences, I think, are very sensitive to that. Occasionally, someone might get away with that, but mostly it's a turnoff. And I think the key to speaking is, yes, to do good storytelling, but it's storytelling in service of an idea. An idea is a gift to someone. Your job is to first give to people before you get anything. People know how to respond. They instinctively, biologically will respond to something that they feel is an act of generosity. So I think that's the question that we try and challenge people to ask is, what's your gift to this audience? What is in your head and in your experience that if they knew, it would light up their lives? Start there. And it's the same applies for-profit, non-profit. It's even worse when a for-profit, guy comes in, pitches my great company, and it's that is a turn-off quickly. What we want to know is, here's how the future could be amazing. Here's what I've learned. Here's an insight that really changed how I see the world. That's what we've got to start there. And it just amazes me that an idea is a little tiny, it's probably smaller than a virus. It's a few little neurons that fire in a particular pattern. that idea, that pattern can go from one mind, mine, to yours, and lodge there. If you get it right, it lodges there. My hope is that some of you next week will have this idea buzzing a little louder than it was before. Okay, I'm going to dream big, and here's how I'm going to do it. Like, it's so exciting that ideas can have that impact and spread like that. So tell stories, but in the service of an idea, not in the service of your organization first and foremost. That's what I'd say.
Hi, my name's Dana Amelia. I'm from the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Nice to meet you. Thanks for presenting today. I always find this to be like fundraising therapy for all of us. And so I feel like we're in store for more. You talked us through once we get everybody in the room and how to think big and dream big and to be bold. And, I appreciate that a lot. I'm curious how you got those people into the room, and maybe we need to ask the people in the green lanyards, but how you got those millionaire, billionaire potential people together, and how I'm looking for some people to make them cry. So how'd you get those people there?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it is the single hardest part of this whole thing. Part of my huge good fortune of spending years at TED is that I've got to know a few people. And, with any party, what matters is the first few people. You actually need 3 people. It might only be one. You need one person who others will be excited about. So you somehow have to find that one person and start with them. And in my case, I had a breakfast with Jeff Skoll in 2013, and said to him, Jeff, he was coming to TED, and what could we do together that we can't do individually? And we started to get excited, and so he got excited about this idea, and we knew Richard Branson, and Branson wanted to offer his island to invite people, and so suddenly it got very easy, right? It doesn't have to be on that scale. If you're like in one town, finding the person who's respected and who can get excited and who you can make a hero, get them on board, and maybe they will invite their friends to their home and you present, or but this is the hardest single bit. But it comes once you've done it once, these things grow, and the next time it's easier. And but yeah, I think it's you're right. That's the single biggest question to focus on, and it's really worth, like, it's almost, we tend to put a lot of effort into almost like, here's the mass communication on the mass marketing. It's actually really worth starting with the huge effort on who are the 1 or 2 people who will tip the dial here and suddenly make things a lot easier. Someone at the back there.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Therese. I'm from CAFOD, based in England. I'm right at the back. Keep looking at the back. Hi. I had a question about, and I wonder if you could speak more to how you said enormous power in letting go, and how you managed to allow the TED brand to expand in that way. And could you share a little bit more about that? Because I think there's some untapped resource, like in my organisation, that I think that people could learn from.
I think it's different in every organization. The biggest single thing to think about in the internet age is, what special knowledge do you have? Or, in some cases it could be, what aesthetic archive do you have, like a set of photographs, or, is there or video, whatever, stuff that you could read. But knowledge, think knowledge. Could you do a sort of a mini university course on your organization's expertise and offer it free? And it's expensive to do, and it sort of might seem weird, and yet that may attract to you the people you most need to know, and it might build your reputation. If you the sort of the idea of TEDx, where you allow people to meet in your name, but that may apply to some of you, to try and encourage local groups to self-form. I think the key there is rules and tools. Like, you can't just do it mindlessly, or it will descend into chaos. You need rules. This is what a gathering has to look like. These are the rules you have to keep to be, for it to count as a TED gathering. And even more important than that, here are the tools you need. So here is a set of guidelines on how to make this rock, and here is how you connect with others so that you can learn from each other. Here's a platform that allows communication. So you need to build those things. But if you do that, it's the most thrilling thing in the world to see a network of volunteers coming together to advance your cause. You wake up in the morning, stuff happened overnight when you were asleep, and it's a beautiful thing. So I would say it's different for every org. Think about what you own in terms of knowledge that could be shared, and think about rules and tools.